6 hours of conversation in November and January, distilled all the way down to, here's what you feel is the most important that we need to live into in a new, more comprehensive way in 2020, in the 21st century, in 2021, in the next chapter of your life with a new pastor, etc. These 5 things. Being a 21st century church, endorsing and nurturing our relationships with one another. This is an internal thing. Worship and spiritual life, that is an individual thing. Community outreach, that is an outside thing. And then being a welcoming environment, that's kind of a combination of in and out. Okay? So the first question I want to ask, I want you to chew on, but I want you to think of it with these 5 core values as the backdrop. How has COVID-19 impacted our faith community? In terms of being and doing church, the way that you remembered being and doing church, but also the way that we talked about wanting to be and do church. How has it impacted that? And what lessons have we learned as a result for moving forward into our future?
Generally, our community is older. A lot of older people do not come because they're concerned about COVID, as they should be. And some are overly cautious, but now they have an opportunity to share with us. I think that is one of the biggest things that we have accomplished in moving our church forward. I think the challenge is, how do we get more people to come into the future? But I think we made a very good first step.
How is it impacted? How is COVID? I mean, it's impacting us negatively because we can't.
Well,
we
as
can't be
much
together.
Specifics as you can give.
We can't be together in fellowship hall after church. We can't. I mean, I heard there was an in-person meeting this past week. But I mean, that's one meeting. I mean,
it was our first.
We need more
trustees. It was the first in 8 months.
Talk to my sister.
Yep.
But anyway, I mean, that to me is negative. We need to find a way where we can get together more as a group without, I mean, yeah, I know, we have to be socially distant, but I mean, what's the max on groups that can be together now indoors?
So churches have different restrictions. Like if we were a bar, we can't open. If we were a restaurant, we can be open at, I think it's 50% capacity now. In church, we can have 50% of whatever room we are in. But we can't convene any meetings that are not worship or church-focused meetings.
Are not.
Correct. So, and then they have to be socially distanced and masked, etc. Which we did. The trustees meeting was fully compliant with all of that.
I'm sure.
Yeah, no, but I'm trying to answer your question. We are already talking to all the committees right now about how to begin engaging in person, unless the majority of people on those committees have comorbidities or have health compromises that require them to continue to do so virtually. We've made the church available. That might not be the question you're asking, but I just thought I would.
Well, it just pertains to fellowship and relationship, because if there's no fellowship, then it can't be a relationship.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that to me is missing, and it needs somehow. I mean, somehow.
Sure. Yes.
I'm going to totally disagree with it.
Pull your mask down when you talk.
I'm going to totally disagree because I feel that the COVID is a positive thing for us because it's made us look outside of the way we're doing services, and now we're on YouTube. And we're on, so to me, that's put us out. And you know for yourself that the numbers of people watching on YouTube is huge compared to what we have coming into church. So I think that's been a positive. The relationship thing, which you gentlemen who run the services aren't aware, but people gather in the parking lot after church and are fellowshipping outside in the parking lot.
Right.
So to me, we still have our fellowship. So to me, that's the positive things. Don, I don't know if you were gonna agree or disagree with me, but I feel like this whole thing has made us, being a 21st century church, it's pushed us into that whole realm that might have taken us years to get to. So I think it's a positive thing.
And to me, that would be a positive on community outreach. It's a negative, to me, if the fellowship and relationship, because it's not, nowhere near, I mean, there's nothing going on here. Except for outside on the line, that's it. It's a positive thing because of the community outreach, because, you know, we have the service out there every week. As far as being welcoming in an environment, I mean, we, come on in, you know, we can't welcome if we can't have people here.
And we just had a new family, we had one new family or two new families join.
Which is good, which is,
So, I mean,
it's
I don't
great.
feel like-
Okay, all
I
right,
don't
Steve,
feel like we're
I'm gonna
stuck.
ask somebody else to talk,
Right.
but we had one family join, we
Yeah.
baptized 2 children, the other family was already, members, but the Dubiness.
For example, the Sim family that's new members, after church last week, I was at CVS and I heard someone say my name, Cherie, and I looked around and I didn't see, you know, and then it ended up being that it was Amy. And because she came to this church, you know, we now know each other, which was reminiscent of ourselves about 10 years ago. I was sharing this story with someone. I had lived in this city for about 10 years, and I didn't experience another friend or person in the community until I came to this church. I ran into Beth Lyle at the library, the post office. And so being part of this family, of this church community is, it gives you a home, a connection, and that's very important to me as we continue, like I said, my contact with Amy last week and the few words and getting to know her family and acknowledging too that that's been wonderful that we've had, you know, new people join the church in the middle of all this. I mean, that's actually been a real blessing and something that's, I think, bolstered, you know, me.
For me personally, community outreach was impacted because we no longer can do the daily bread, which was, you know, a major activity that helped the people in the community. And those people are still out there and we don't know what's happening to them.
Somebody even asked me the question a couple weeks ago, can we start offering daily bread? You know, the initial reaction is no. For those of you that don't know, daily bread is a Saturday breakfast that has a huge number of people in this room on Saturdays. But there might be way. I mean, it's, you know, kind of like necessity is the mother of invention. I'm sure there is a way to do it. We just haven't had the conversation yet. But it's takeout and you know, part of the problem is the layout of the kitchen doesn't allow for distancing, so accommodations have to be made. But Dan's and my discovery, and then discussions with others, but specifically Dan's and my conversations ever since early March have constantly been not can we do something, but how can we do something. I think that's just the natural outgrowth of feeling convicted that God still wants us to be church.
It's also impacted things like the tea that brings in 100 people every year, and we've got to turn people away at the door. And not knowing how, if we're going to be able to do that or how we're going to be able to do that. So those kinds of things are impacted. They may not seem important, but
They certainly are the people that attend them. They're
yeah,
very, very
right. And but a good thing is to see people who aren't able to get out of their homes, but yet now they can enjoy get their spiritual food through their television or their computer. So that's good.
Well, we've learned to adapt. But I think about there's a core of women who wanted to get together. And so that we met outside on the lawn all summer long at distancing, eating our lunch. And we couldn't give up on that, so we're taking the lunch on the road outside next Tuesday. But also, we're going to go to City Hall and use City Hall, and we're going to make blankets for the interfaith shelter.
Right.
So we're not giving up getting together, only we're doing it differently, adapting as we can.
Right.
If one thing that I have learned from COVID, because, as most of you know, my son is, was in a little bubble by himself, and, only his mother and I and his son are able to go in and see him, which is great. I mean, which take all the people who have health issues and put that aside. The vast majority of us don't have that. What I'm concerned about with COVID moving forward, from this day forward, is this paralysis that some people have. And I think we need to really address that listen, wear your mask, wash your hands, sanitize, stay social distance, and you're going to be okay. There's a life that we have to move on with, and we can't stay paralyzed.
We entered in new things we never would have gone
Yes.
before. We went through little trials at the beginning with Facebook Live, but I'm glad to see that, and I hope to continue that, after, because it gives a new outreach. The other thing is, I was thinking of updating the hymnals. Our old hymnals were getting kind of old, not new. When you display the music in front, we don't need new hymnals.
Right, and it also opens up the opportunity for new styles of music.
Yes.
New stuff, yeah.
Without throwing out the old,
Yes.
we have been able to
I think the
stretch.
services are more modern than what they used to be, and I personally enjoy it. I like the variety of music. Like I say, one last thing.
Yes, of course.
The sermons are very meaty. They're
Good.
very good. I really like every one of the sermons. Sometimes I feel like you're preaching just to me, but the Bible verses, the subjects, they're very good. I don't know if it's the right word, but we have the product to give out to the community. We just have to reach people in the community.
And I think we've come light years from when we first started doing virtual church to where we are now.
We can only hope.
To where we are going, quite
Uh-huh,
frankly.
sure.
Because we're stretching this baby.
Yep.
We want to go live. Not, we're taping it now, stuff like that. We want it live. So when you tune in at 10 o'clock or whenever we decide our church service is going to be, that you tune in, bang, there we are. The people out there will be doing it with us here. And I think that is terrific, just terrific.
Dan Piper's working with us to get sanctuary, as well as this room actually, but specifically the sanctuary hardwired for internet. That's the hiccup there. So we don't have to have a huge influx of more equipment. We just have to have a better connection. Soon after that, Sean is going to be having us broadcasting live.
With that being said, we'll be doing it live, and that's great. Unfortunately, we can't interact with people on YouTube and live because it's up 6-8 hours after it happens. Bringing back when we first started out, watching people interact with us, that whole thing will come back, once we get it live.
Right.
I was going to make some of the comments that have already been made, but I think each of those subjects that we have up on the board, there could be subsections of them.
Okay.
And that we might need to, at some point, discuss a little bit what they mean. But I'd like to go to the last one, only to to bring a conversation that I had with our granddaughter Emily about welcoming diverse people. And she made a great comment that each month during the year, there appears to be some welcoming to some of the diverse members of our community. February is Black History Month. I'm not sure when it's the Gay Pride
June.
And her comment was, well, rather than hang one flag out, but at some point make it clear that on Black History Month, on Gay Pride Month, that we do some outreach then specific to that event, as opposed to the phrase that I think the Congregational UCC uses is open and affirming. I'm uncomfortable with that part of it, but I'm comfortable in saying we welcome all parts of the community. And how can we do that on a specific basis? I'll second Charlie's comment about the worship, the focusing in on the biblical. I found that to be extremely interesting. And today when Dan was talking about lead us not into temptation, but maybe the phrase could also be lead us away from temptation. That would be a duty for God, lead us away from temptation. That's the end of the episode.
I hope not. We want to fill the hour with all your comments. Other thoughts, how has COVID impacted church life and church ministry? And what lessons have we learned?
One thing that I miss from the effects of COVID is being able to have the choir gather.
Yeah.
Midweek for practice, but being able to sing together during the service.
Especially for choir members, that's a big gutting of your week and of your church experience. That it changes how you view church.
Is there any way that we could, I mean, I see 3 choir members here. I mean, is there any way that we can, moving forward, figure out a way that choir members could be located in, and I don't mean to digress, throughout the church, that, that they could do something like that, and even if it's a hymn that we all know, but they could participate separately or individually or whatever. I mean, I love like when Irene sings and so on. I think it's great, but I'd like to hear from everyone, and I don't know if that's possible. So I just want to throw it out there.
Yeah. There are ways of doing that in different spaces. The fact that we don't use our balcony would it takes that option out of it. It's very unsafe up there, but that would be a natural place to try that and keep them apart. There has to be, so this is not my personal reflection on the choir as it is or was or whatever, but just as a choral conductor in my former life. There has to be a minimum level of musicality among every person in the choir in order for them to be able to sing as one unit, spread that far apart from one another. And that's difficult enough for instrumentalists. It's doubly as difficult for choral groups who are depending on the voice next to them. So, yes, there are ways. Our space would require us to get very creative with it. Rehearsal time becomes problematic because you need to be able to convene them. And right now it still is against state law to convene in order to sing, unless they're apart. But rehearsing people 6 feet or more away from each other becomes very problematic too. So anyway.
I've been very surprised at how much I have become digitally savvy, out of necessity. And so, once again, we go screaming and kicking into, an area where, like Ronnie said, it would have taken us years to get to. So, now that we're here, I think, having meetings online in a Zoom situation like we did with our deacons meeting might be the beginning of keeping those relationships current, because we'll see one another, and that's part of that. And then what the deacons were doing, and what everybody can do, is just call one or two people to see how they're doing, and let them hear a warm voice, so that we'd be prepared when the doors open to get back here. We won't be, we can hit the ground running. So what we're doing is good, we just need to do more often.
I feel that using the virtual services that have been provided, that starting way back in April, that I believe we now have more people viewing Pilgrim Church as a place in the community, and even in other states, that maybe had not been aware that we were a church community. Just my personal feeling in looking at some of the, when I was looking at virtually, and I saw some of the people who signed in, and I know there were people from other, that were not part of our church community.
I think we've learned that you can do church in many different ways. I think people are surprised at, when you looked at it and so many churches were closed, you thought, well, that's it. That's the end of it. But we've opened ourselves up, we've stretched, we've grown, and we see that church can happen in a lot of different ways. And it can be equally meaningful as it was in the past.
Yes.
Forced us to kind of reinvent church.
Yep.
We had to reinvent church. We wanted to stay together as a church, as a faith community, so that we could get the people who, for whatever reason, couldn't join us on a Sunday on a thing, to have the service, so that we could all be together. So, kudos to everybody involved, as far as I'm concerned, that helped us get through this process. Without it, I don't know where we'd be, but not in a good place.
COVID really wasn't all a bad thing, since it pushed us to do what, a lot of us do at work. We all work virtually, and now we're all worshiping virtually.
I have one quick comment of how I appreciate having this scripture, being able to read it without quickly trying to find it in the Bible, because you all got, sometimes you're way ahead of me and I don't get the whole thing. But I like to combine the visual with the hearing, and I appreciate that.
For my husband and I, this forced us to finally do the online banking, which I had just been delaying, but knowing that, hey, we have an obligation. So I think that moves us into the 21st. I don't know how it has affected the pledging for other factors within the church. And the other thing is just noticing, is the Spanish church still using this room?
They are.
So that is a benefit that you and Dan and Sean and everybody else were willing to open up, because now that's another religious community that is able to worship in presence and not having to wait until something else.
And here's something else about that, just about that particular point. They have more people coming than they had before COVID.
I love that.
Which totally stumps me, but we're here, at least I'm here until long after they've left. And so online banking, good for you.
So to piggyback on what you just mentioned, a couple minutes prior, I was talking to people at the First Congressional Church in Gardner.
First Congressional?
Yeah.
Congregational?
Oh.
I know, it's voting time, it's election time, it's all about Congress.
And they're still on Zoom. doing in October, public services, and it's only like a 25 cap, and that's all.
Oh.
And it's mostly elderly people, so it's
Yep.
even lower.
Yep.
And we haven't, as far as I know, none of us have been contact traced through being here, so we're doing our job.
Oh, yeah, and by the way, Robin was a huge part in figuring out state compliance when we started this, when we put together a plan that we had to present to the city and we had to present to the church leadership.
Yeah, for me, the big word is distraction. I love being here on Sundays, I love being present. But, you know, whether it's, you know, sustenance or being, you know, in the kingdom of God, I feel like it's not my primary focus because I'm just like so distracted. And I mean, I agree with you, we know what we have to do to take care of ourselves so we could be together. But in the meantime, we need to find ways to take care of each other. Whether it's reaching out to people, calling them, emailing them, checking in with them. And I feel badly that because of all this distraction, I'm not checking out with my neighbor or, you know, the people who aren't coming here. So, yeah, for me, that's, I mean, COVID has just been this, I mean, yes, anxiety producing a real legitimate concern, but then just what it's done to, you know, my mind and my ability to, you know, put one foot in front of each other and keep my eye on the prize, it's been, you know, it's been a real barrier, I think, to be part of this church life for me.
My take on this whole COVID thing, as far as our faith, I think it's made us stronger. And I think it's forced Pilgrim as a church to jump into the 21st century, which is kind of where we were headed, I think, anyway.
Well, I would have pushed you in, maybe kicking and screaming if you didn't, but as it turns out, we all got pulled in, you know, ahead of schedule. Yep.